Here we go, boys and girls. Another book review, Chasing the Scream by Joanne Hardy. Yo, this is a dope book. You got to get this book. This book is everything. This book is about the war on drugs in America and why we should end it. Um, I love this book, and I definitely believe that we should legalize all drugs after reading this book, Chasing the Scream. And the reason is first of all, the war on drugs was started because some dude named Harry Anslinger hated black people and was like, we have to make weed illegal so we could throw all these black people in jail. And that's basically what he did. And that's why, like, I think 70% or 80% of the prison population is black, which is ridiculous. Um, and but because he started this war on drugs, he also created a criminal element. He also allowed for the Mexican cartels and all these other gangs to then rise to power because when you make something illegal, when you prohibit something like they did with alcohol, remember the alcohol prohibition, that led to all types of violence in the streets. And so now we're seeing the same things with this war on drugs. It's just caused all this violence in the streets across borders. When you watch Narcos, you see it's because drugs are illegal that these guys are just murdering each other, fighting for territory. They estimate that if we legalize drugs, it would reduce homicides by 25 to 75%. That's a huge number. And it's insane to think that most people are dying because drugs are illegal. And I know what you're saying. You're like, well, if we legalize drugs, more people would die. Not the case according to this book right here. The truth is, a lot of people who die from drug overdoses die because they don't know what they're getting. Meaning, when you do heroin in its purest form actually doesn't cause the effects that you see caused in television, like people like losing their teeth and their eyes bulging out. That is only caused because the heroin or drugs that they're getting is cut with other elements. Like people put brick dust, baking soda, uh, 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 all types of metals in the heroin and all these street drugs because they're trying to increase their profits. So if you get medical grade heroin or medical grade cocaine, it actually doesn't have the immediate horrible effects on you that getting street grade processed drugs do. It's kind of like getting a cupcake from the bakery versus a Twinkie. Like a cupcake from the bakery, man, that just it sits in your stomach a little better, it digests better. But a Twinkie, man, a Twinkie had you up all night. You know what I'm saying? So this street heroin is like the Twinkie. You understand what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? Anyway, and also the reason why most people do get on drugs in the first place is because they've had some childhood abuse or trauma that's been hard for them to deal with, one, or they have had an injury, back pain. A lot of truck drivers, nurses, construction workers, they hurt themselves and then they start off getting the prescription drugs, the Vicodins, the Oxycontins. And then when their insurance runs out and their money runs out, then all of a sudden, and that pain is still there, now they're going to that the heroin and the street grade stuff, and now he's in jail. He threw his back out. He had a job, then he threw his back out, and he was taking up prescribed drugs. But then the medication ran out, or the prescription ran out, and now he's on heroin, and now he's in jail. It's a ridiculous cycle, and now he's out on the street, and who knows what happens from there. Um, but what they found in other countries that when you legalize drugs, what happens is drug use goes up a little bit, but drug harm goes down because what they've put in place are places where people can go and safely get their drugs, where they're monitored by nurses and doctors and things like that. So, and they're getting clean needles. So you're also seeing a reduction in HIV. You're seeing a reduction in crime. You're seeing a reduction in, uh, whatever other social ills are out there. But and the other thing is when you legalize drugs is that in its place, you're helping people get reconnected with society. And I know some people are still like, nah, man, because, drugs, man, if you do drugs, you're just hooked for life. You're just hooked for life. But what they found is that's not true also, is because during the Vietnam War, most of the vets over there did heroin. And I mean, it's because addiction isn't an adaptation, meaning like when people become addicted to a drug, usually it's because they're trying to adapt to the environment they're in. And so our soldiers and our troops who were, when they were over there in Vietnam, they were doing heroin. It's like these are 19-year-old, 18, 19-year-old kids looking at war, looking at their friends getting blown up, and like who can handle that? So they're doing heroin. But what they found is when they came back, only 95% of them got clean on their own within the first year, and only 5% of them remained addicted. And that 5%, it was because they had a childhood trauma, that they already had some things that they were trying to get over, and plus they had an injury, and then they had few social connections. And so that brings me to the last part is the the way we combat the war, drug usage and drug overdose is through helping people who are on drugs, one, become socially connected. When you put them in jail and then they have to fill out a form when they get out of jail saying that they're a felon, now they can't get a job. And when you can't get a job and you can't provide, that means chances are you're not going to get a girl, you're not going to get married, you're not going to have kids. And it's just slowly isolating you from society, is slowly removing you from community, from people, from feeling like, you can contribute. And in isolation, loneliness, and uh, poor social connections, those are the three main and childhood trauma. Those are the main factors that contribute to continued drug use. When you look at the Native Americans, you go, oh, they're just alcoholics. But they didn't start drinking alcohol and become alcoholics until we kicked them and removed them and isolated them from their land. When you look at the poor English, they started drinking gin because they were removed from their land. When you look at the inner cities of America, when black people were doing crack in the 70s and 80s, that wasn't until after all those factories shut down and they didn't have jobs and then they couldn't move anywhere, so they were isolated and lonely and there was no upward mobility for them. When you look at rural America, the Appalachian Mountains, where they're doing a lot of meth up there, once again, not a lot of job opportunities, very isolated, socially disconnected. And so when you look at these areas where there's loneliness, social disconnection, poor job opportunities, you see an increase in drug use and sustained drug use, and it makes it harder for people to get off. So for you guys who are out there struggling with addiction, remember, it's not an addiction as much as it is an adaptation, or let me rephrase that. It can be an addiction, but it's not a disease. It's an adaptation. And the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it is connection. And the more we can get you connected to yourself, to the people around you, and to your society, then the less likely you are to relapse. And so, how do you connect to yourself? One of the ways is through meditation. I meditate 20 minutes a day. Another way is journaling. And you have to like journal your feelings. Like, I feel so. Blah, blah. You can just journal things you're grateful for. Journal your vision. Journal what's worked for you for the day. So it doesn't have to be this emotional outpouring. It could just be like things you want to get done for the day, things you're grateful for. Other ways to connect: go for a walk, exercise, really connect with your body, really connect with yourself. Ways to connect with people around you is really just sit and listen to people, right? Like if you go to a bar or coffee shop, just strike up conversations, really listen. It's not about like trying to fix people or trying to get a girl's phone number. Don't put all that pressure on yourself. Just go out and really try to connect, with your friends. Call up old family members, old friends, and just see how they're doing. Just check up on people. Say, hey, I was thinking about you. How are you doing? A way to socially connect or commute with your community. You can do volunteer work, man. Somebody always needs their grass cut. There's an old lady right now that would love for you to come over and help remove something. Start a Habitat for Humanity. Um, there's so many ways for you to get involved in different clubs, book clubs, playing sports. Find a way to really get connected to your community and the people around you. And when you have all those things in place, it'll prevent your relapse. But the last thing I want to mention is rehab and AA. I think because loneliness and isolation are one of the two biggest factors in like you relapsing or staying involved in drugs. Rehab, I feel like has a high recidivism rate because uh, you're isolated, you're lonely. And what rehab doesn't really do is help you to connect with your community, connect with the people around you in your day-to-day life, right? So you go off to rehab, but then you come back and you still haven't really developed skills on how to connect and communicate with people around you. Now, rehab has worked for some people, but I think that's a component missing from these drug rehab facilities is that they don't really give you the tools on how to connect and how to communicate with people around you. So, but AA I think is a great tool. And I think the way to use AA meetings is instead of going to the AA meetings in your community, if you're of the lower socioeconomic status, go to an AA meeting in a place that is of a higher socioeconomic status. And I know that might require like a longer bus ride or bus trip, but what that does is um, it opens up your social network. It opens up your connectivity to other people, other possibilities, other cultures, other ways of thinking. And go early in the morning if you're going to AA meetings. Because the people who go to AA meetings first thing in the morning, those are people who are usually CEOs, execs, doing very well in life. And the later you go to an AA meeting, usually those people are struggling in life financially, still trying to get back on their feet. And so it's just a way to give you a more optimistic view of things in the world around you. My name is Leo Flowers. Thank you guys for tuning in. This was a book review of Chasing the Scream, which I love. You have to read it. Um, so much information in here. And see you next time. Peace.